Welcome to the Jaron Jarvis channel. I am Jaron Jarvis. Today, I would like to introduce to you, trust me, you should always sleep through overnight flights. Some backstory: I'm a male, 27 years old, from the good old US of A. Until recently, I was a hedge fund manager, and a damn good one at that. Yeah, I'm one of those millennials you hear about, who waltzed onto Wall Street thanks to daddy's money, made some good investments, brokered some good deals, landed a lucrative role handling other people's hard-earned cash, and did a good goddamn job with it. I was not quite in the 1% on my own volition yet, but I was getting there. I've always tried not to be a dick about it. I know I got very lucky. I'm saying this because, I don't want my legacy to be one of those dickhole guys in finance who don't give a crap about others. I do give a crap about others, and I hope that this one time, I can ask others to give a crap about me. I need it right now. I'm not doing great. I'm not in a good place. I do my bit. I donate to charity. I go to protest marches. I try to be humanitarian. I'm not a perfect dude, by any means, and I'm more than aware what I contributed to when I played such a big role in capitalism. This isn't about any of that though. But if you can spare it, I just want some humanity to come my way right now. I've been reassessing what's important to me. I hope you'll understand why. Late last year, towards the end of November, my job required me to head to Europe to meet with a prospective investor, an associate of one of my clients. I was glad to get out the country, honestly. It had been 2 weeks or so since the election, and I, like many others, was deeply embarrassed about our role on the world stage. I cringed as I stood in the boarding line at LAX wondering how German citizens would react to an American in 2016. I was pretty sure Europe, and everywhere else, was laughing at us. What this meant was that my anxiety, already sky high, no pun intended, thanks to the upcoming flight, was playing havoc with my sense of inner peace. I'm a calm, collected guy. I have to be with my job. But, hell, hurtling at high speeds through the air in a steel tube is enough to shit me right up. I'm not a good flyer. Weirdly, one thing I've found helps with flying is to take night flights. Light spilling in from the airplane windows seems to make it worse, somehow. So I was intensely grateful that my departure time, 7:23 p.m., and my arrival time, 6:47 a.m., would mean that the route my flight took was almost entirely dark. The route between LAX and Franz Josef Strauss International in Munich is a polar one on a Great Circle route. This means it flies across the US, up into Canada, then across the ocean for a while until, at roughly the halfway point, we'd be heading over Greenland. I'd never taken a polar route before, and as someone who'd spent a portion of my childhood in Alaska, I'll admit I was a little excited about flying over the beautiful frozen tundras. So I was in the departure lounge, making my last call before I had to board the plane, chatting to Nicole, the girl I was seeing back then. I'll admit it, I was being a bit of a jerk to her. There she was, on the phone to me, going on about how she hoped I had a safe flight, giving me tips to deal with the anxiety, generally being really lovely and caring, and I was too busy eyeing up the incredibly toned ass of the Starbucks barista who'd given me a heart-melting smile as I'd gotten my coffee. I watched the barista clearing up tables, barely paying attention to what Nicole was saying. The barista saw me watching, and gave me one of those "oh you" looks, before winking slightly. I checked the time. Damn it. Not long till I had to board. So you'll call me when you get there? Nicole was saying. Yeah, sure, I'll call, I reassured Nicole. She sounded needy. I hated that. Looking back now, I know she was just being sympathetic about my own anxiety. Christ, why am I such a dick? I love you, Nicole said. I'll be back before you know it, I told her, then hung up. The barista met my eye, and I gave him a "what can you do" IRL as I gestured to my phone. He smiled wickedly. God, what I wouldn't have given for another hour or two before my flight. Still, I had a bit of time, so I ordered another coffee, if only for an excuse to talk to him. It was my fourth. Yeah, okay. I'm a fucking pussy when it comes to attraction. My thirst gets the better of me, And I'll do stupid shit like ordering 4 large lattes as an excuse to talk to a hot guy or gal. But hey, often it works out. I see a lot of people. Nicole was the first person I'd actually gone exclusive with in a while. I wasn't sure it suited me. But flirting with the hot Starbucks barista absolutely did, and it was only as I finally took my seat on the plane that I maybe began to regret imbibing so much caffeine. The flight took off without incident, but it was fraught with annoyance from the moment we took to the air. I was in a business class seat of an airline which I daren't name for reasons that will become obvious. I'd flown with them before, and knew that their business class section was unrivaled. Wonderful service, plenty of legroom, great in-flight entertainment, and most importantly, ridiculously comfortable seats in which to sleep for the duration of a 12-hour flight. I'd set my alarm on vibrate, to go off just before we hit Greenland, but I figured that even if I slept through it, it'd be fine. There was the return journey, after all. So from the minute we were airborne, and remember, I hate flying, so I was there like gripping my seat handles trying to calm my nerves, some traumatized baby a few rows ahead of me kept bawling its poor little eyes out. Properly shrieking, howling. Who the fuck takes a baby in business class anyway? I hadn't realized it was even allowed. The couple, a young, tanned white couple, seemed to be accompanied by some kind of heavy in a suit, probably a bodyguard. Celebrities, I figured. Celebrities with their screaming baby. Absolutely fucking perfect. The stewardesses, 2 drop-dead gorgeous women, a blonde and a redhead, were making their way up and down the plane with forced smiles plastered to their botoxed lips. Every time the baby shrieked, I saw Red involuntarily wince, saw a tick in her left eyelid as she leaned over to me and asked if there was anything I needed. Earplugs? I joked. Red giggled. I'm sure she'll settle down soon. She gave me a flirty smile. I've got a bottle of Xanax in my carry-on. Just give me the word if you wanna slip a pill or 2 into its bottle. Red gave a scandalized, amused gasp. You might want to keep them for yourself, sir, she said. Towards the front of the plane, a very large elderly gentleman was loudly complaining about something. Or, you know, for me. I'll bear that in mind, I told her, trying to be as suave as possible. Considering the white-hot terror I felt at being suspended in the air, and the cold sweat on my upper lip, I don't think I did a bad job of being charming. Red tipped me a wink and disappeared off to help Blonde with the passengers. I closed my eyes and tried to calm myself, to get myself into the kind of zen-like zone I'd aim for before I closed any major deals. The baby shrieked. The plane hit a spot of turbulence. It wasn't working. Sighing, I dropped a Xanax, then another for good measure. I rattled the bottle. Enough to hook you up, Red, I said under my breath. As usual, I was beside the window. I know, I've been told so many times that if I have a fear of flying, I should take an aisle seat. But fuck that. Even in business class, I don't want to be jostled or bumped into by all and sundry passing me on their way to the bathroom. I'd rather take a bit of existential terror over having some octogenarian lady thrusting her ballooning ass into my face. Whatever. Sue me. I'm my own worst enemy. Eventually the Xanax kicked in and, as I knew I would, I calmed down. The plane had Wi-Fi, so I passed the time by checking my emails, dicking around on an app for a while, going on Twitter, Reddit, the usual. The interior plane lights had dimmed and there was a nice, calm atmosphere threatening to kick in. If it hadn't been for the baby, mercifully not constant anymore, but still letting out miserable howls, it would have actually been nice. The seat nearest to me was free, so I totally had my thoughts and space to myself. And, heck, baby's gonna baby, right? I was sure I could drown the little girl out if I tried hard enough. After a while, Red came over and offered me a drink. I asked for an orange juice, and regarded the low neckline of her stewardess blouse with undisguised yet brief positive appraisal. As I'd intended, Red saw me looking and blushed slightly. Shortly she returned with my drink. Let me know when you need one of these, I joked, holding up the Xanax script bottle and shaking it. Red shot a look down the plane. Might take you up on that offer, she said. Her accent was divine, Scottish with a twinge of American. Her name tag told me she was called Annalise. I wondered if it was a typo, or the actual spelling. I made a mental note to ask her about it later if we'd become sufficiently flirty that a sexual joke which she'd no doubt heard before would be charming instead of creepy. Problems? I asked. Annalise rolled her eyes. Quietly she slipped into the empty seat next to mine, glancing around, probably to check she wouldn't get in any trouble, just the kind of flyer who's never happy with anything, you know? She said. Christ, I shouldn't be telling you this. She reached out and touched my forearm gently. I felt a tiny stirring of anticipation deep in the pit of my stomach. Heck, we all need to let loose once in a while, I told her, flashing her my most wolfish winning smile. I know, I'm a fucking cliché. I'd better get back, Annalise said suddenly, quickly standing up again almost as soon as she'd sat. Don't wanna get fired. I watched her leave appreciatively. Some time later, the overhead tannoy crackled. This is your pilot speaking, a male voice said. We hope you're having an enjoyable flight, and wish to thank you for choosing to fly with us. Should passengers choose to sleep for the duration of the flight, which is highly recommended, now would be a good time to bed down and get some shut-eye, to be awake fresh and ready for our landing in Munich. Sleeping aids including blindfolds are available from the stewardesses, and we hope everyone has an enjoyable sleep. I frowned. The caffeine was still in my system. I'd need more than a couple Xanax to get some sleep. Still, it was nice of the pilot to care about us like that. I smiled. My smile grew even wider as classical music began drifting from the tannoid, some kind of lullaby, I thought. How strange. Then I realized, suddenly, that the baby had stopped crying. I waited with bated breath. For the first time on the flight, not a goddamn peep. I smiled again, and chuckled quietly to myself. Well played, pilot. Well played. A couple hours passed. I sat, boredom having replaced my anxiety, as all around me my fellow passengers snored and snuffled in the darkness. I gazed out the window. The blinking lights on the plane's wing pulsed rhythms in the night sky as 1,000 stars pierced the darkness, interstellar waypoints on our cross-continental journey. I thought of the ancient mariners, navigating their ships by the stars, swaying and bobbing on moonlit oceans. I thought of Nicole, alone in her apartment, probably sitting on the couch with a glass of red wine watching Netflix, or else tucked up in bed, maybe wearing that gorgeous lace nightgown I bought her, the one you could see the shadows of her nipples through in just the right light. I felt a stirring in my crotch. Yeah, Nicole was good people really. The warm Xanax buzz was giving me fond memories of the girl waiting back in the US for me. A pang of guilt ricocheted around my ribs, quietly dissolving into a sense of blissful calm. My eyelids began to feel heavy. The darkness washed over me. I awoke with a start. The plane was twilight, aisles illuminated with the low glow of the overhead luggage lights. To my right, the adorable old couple on the other side of the aisle lay slumbering, the old man's head resting upon his wife's white curls. Even the goddamn baby was silent. Something nearby smelled sweet, cloying, like someone had unloaded a huge pile of unwrapped candy in the seat ahead of mine. My stomach turned slightly, and a brief wave of nausea hit me. A sharp pain flared momentarily in my head, then faded into a dull, low-key headache. And worse, my bladder ached. I needed to pee, badly. I checked the time. I'd slept for a couple of hours, no more. Just under halfway through the flight. I felt entirely, utterly awake, and cursed myself for the intake of caffeine earlier, just to flirt with a guy I'd likely never see again. For now, though, my only worry was getting to the bathroom without unceremoniously waking another passenger. I navigated my way down the plush carpeted aisle, taking care not to bump into any stray limbs. I glanced around the darkened plane for Annalise, but of either of the stewardesses, I saw no sign. Probably down at the front, doing whatever stewardesses do when they're not tending to passengers. When I reached the bathroom, it was occupied. Cursing, I lounged against the wall, waiting for the errant toilet goer to depart. My bladder felt like it was about to explode. 2 minutes passed, then 3. I stared angrily at the red occupied indicator LED on the door, willing it to ping green. 4. Nothing. I thought about heading down to economy class, to use the bathroom there, but that might have required walking down the whole length of a tiny, cramped aisle, and I put it out my mind. 5 minutes. Frowning, I pushed the bathroom door gently. It swung open, revealing a dimly lit but definitely empty room. The lock pinged green. I rolled my eyes and chuckled under my breath. Typical. I hurried inside and hastily unloaded my bladder, sighing in relief. It was a decently sized, roomy bathroom for an airplane toilet. Certainly one that would make renewing my membership in the Mile High Club a doable prospect, should it come to that. Speaking of, I looked around again for anal eyes as I headed back to my seat. I thought I caught a glimpse of flowing red hair disappearing off into one of the staff rooms down the other end of the plane. The kitchen, maybe? I took my time heading back to my seat, hoping that your blondie would notice me, see that I was awake, come and offer me a drink. Wasn't there a button I could press to summon one of them? I slid back into my chair and began to look for such a device. I was absolutely sure it had been on the overhead panel last time I'd flown with this airline. There was the lights, the aircon. Nothing like a call button though. I frowned. Must be an older model plane. Or, no, maybe it was on the touch screen built into the seat, the TV through which I could watch any number of insipid Hollywood blockbusters. I couldn't even get the goddamn screen to turn on. Cursing technology, I took to staring out the window as I waited for something, anything to happen on the plane to alleviate my boredom. My throat was parched, come to think about it, and I actually really did want a drink. Was it a faux pas to go and find a stewardess? It did mean pinballing my way down the aisle again and risk disturbing my fellow passengers. And that infuriating baby was down that way, wasn't it? What if I awoke the infant and it resumed its bawling? I decided to wait for as long as I could. I couldn't focus. My energy levels were rising, the Xanax had worn off and I was growing restless. I glanced around this way and that, out the window, around the cabin, up at the ceiling. I missed the eye candy of anal eyes. Where the hell were the stewardesses? I prayed for another passenger to be awake, to summon them loudly and without reservation, so that maybe I could make an unobtrusive, polite gesture myself. Then I heard it. The sound. At first I thought it was a rattling, something in the luggage rack above my head. But no. It was a rhythmic tap-tap-tapping, like a part of the plane, gently coming loose as the aircraft traveled ever forwards. Panic began to grip me. Could that happen? Could a plane just fall apart in midair? What if it was one of the bolts holding the wing on? Was that even how planes are made? I listened harder. The tapping was coming from nearby, I could tell that much. It wasn't above me. No, in retrospect, that would have been so much more relieving. The tapping was coming from beside me. On my left. From the direction of the window, looking out into the night. Realization dawned on me as a cold, biting fear gripped my body. What if the goddamn window was about to fall out, to go flying off into the atmosphere? Would we all get sucked out the hole? That's how it works, isn't it? My head snapped around, to stare at the offending window, absolutely convinced that I'd watch it shatter into oblivion. Instead, what I saw made my blood run colder than I could have possibly imagined. It was a fleeting glimpse, a brief, split-second movement. But enough to momentarily block out the blinking light from the plane's wing, enough to be sure, utterly, adamantly sure, that I'd seen something. And I would have assumed a bird? I would have assumed anything. I would have rationalized it, I know I would have. If not for one thing, the thing that the tapper had left behind. A fingerprint, on the window. A human fingerprint. I wiped at it frantically with my sleeve, hoping and praying that I'd left it there myself, or it had been there the entire time and I hadn't noticed. But no, there was no getting away from it, the fingerprint was on the outside of the glass. My brain felt like it had been gripped by icy, spiky needles. I always thought the phrase "a chill ran down my spine" was a meaningless cliché, but it really isn't. It's a kind of nervous, Electric terror that feels like a jolt of electricity originating in your brain and traveling down through the epicenter of your body, reaching the base of your balls. An intimate, horrible terror like nothing I'd ever felt before. The fingerprint had not been there previously. I knew this as surely as I knew my own name at that point. It had not been left by one of the ground crew. It had been placed upon the window as an unknown being tapped on the window. The fingerprint was brown and rusty. I could make out the whirls and swirls of the pad that had pressed against the glass. It looked like the owner of the finger had placed the tip into some kind of dirt, mud, oxidized metal, and it was large. I held my own finger up to the print. I have feminine, slender hands, but even so it dwarfed mine by some considerable margin. Not so big that it couldn't have feasibly belonged to a human, nothing that inexplicable, but it brought to mind a huge, hulking man, dressed in dirty farm overalls, his hands stained with earth and, yes, blood. The fingerprint was bloody. I had to admit this to myself, accept everything I was seeing, or I was going to go truly mad. I craned in my seat, trying to position my body to stare this way and that down the outside of the plane. I could barely see past the window in either direction, but it didn't seem like anyone was somehow attached limpet-like to the side of the plane. I stared at the wing, half expecting to see some leather-face-looking motherfucker rambling his way along the metal, dirty apron blowing in the crosswinds. The wing was free of passengers, of course. I took a moment to stop, think, and drop another Xanax. What was I dealing with here? Terrorists? Was this a new kind of plane hijacking, where terrorists would hide on the outside of a plane, then somehow breach the cabin, get inside, take control? That seemed extremely unlikely. And even if so, why would one of the terrorists be outside my window, tapping on the glass, as we flew high over Greenland? In my terror, I'd all but forgotten we'd be flying over this winter wonderland. Somehow, the thrill didn't seem anywhere near as thrilling anymore. In fact, I rather didn't want to look out the window anymore at all. So I did what any cowardly, pussified 27-year-old man would do. I closed the shutter on the window. Amazingly, this actually calmed me. Okay, it was probably the Xanax kicking in, but at the time I felt pretty good about myself for my grand idea. I sat there, staring forward into the black mirror of the dead HD TV screen ahead of me, and actually felt like things were going to be all right. People simply didn't tap on the exteriors of plane windows. It had to be some kind of well-known phenomenon, right? It had to be something that the flight crew knew about, laughed at, probably had a joke at passengers' expenses with. Flight crew. Stewardesses. Well, shit, I decided, I'll ask Analyze. It was as good an excuse as any to make my way up the plane. My legs were trembling and my hands were shaking, maybe I wasn't as calm as I'd thought. But somehow, a miracle, I reached the end of the cabin without waking a single passenger. They were all asleep. Every single one of them. I envied them, at that moment. At the end of the cabin, a small door frame led into a corridor, which headed in 3 directions. Ahead of me was the big security door that no doubt opened onto the cockpit. To the right, what I assumed to be the stewardess's break room and a bathroom. To the left, a closed-door-reed kitchen. I headed into the break room first. Here, as it had been down the other end, the bathroom door-reed engaged. I hesitated for a moment, not willing to catch Analyze on the toilet, but I weighed it up and figured this was probably a worthy emergency, or at the very least an icebreaker to continue our flirting. I knocked on the bathroom door. No answer. I waited. I knocked again. I gently pushed the door, half expecting it to swing open as the other had. Nope, this one was legitimately engaged. I knocked a 3rd time. Hello? I called out in a hushed tone. Analyze? Anyone? A muffled clattering came from within the bathroom. I waited. Knocked again. Come on. Yes, hello, yeah? I heard a voice say, and I could have almost cried with relief as I recognized Analyze's sing-song accent. She sounded impatient, flustered, but fuck, she was here. It's me, I said. Passenger in row G Xanax guy. I've got, I've got a little problem. The door to the bathroom was jerked open a crack. Annalise peered out at me through the gap. She looked tired, her face pale and strained. Her red hair was disheveled, messy. I tried to glance past her without her noticing, over her shoulder, wondering with a pang of inappropriate jealousy whether she had someone else in there with her. It was hard to tell, the bathroom looked tiny, and almost pitch dark. "You can't be in here, sir," Annalise said. "Staff quarters." I tried to smile at her, give her a charming but it's me look, but she seemed to be having none of it. In fact, she barely seemed to recognize who I was. Her mouth was set tight, a little scowl on her dark crimson lips. My own smile dropped, and I adopted a different tact. "Okay, well, I can't find any way to actually call the stewardess," I said. Annalise sighed. "Use your TV. It's a function." I stared at her. "My TV doesn't work." Annalise's face softened, then she opened the bathroom door and stepped out. Her clothes looked rumpled, as if she'd been sleeping in them, rather than getting fondled under them. And I was able to see, for certain, that there was no one else in the bathroom with her. She stepped out, and suddenly her face changed in recognition as she saw me. "Oh, it's you." "Sorry," she said. I frowned. It was only then that I realized the whole area I stood in was dark, so dark that she hadn't been able to see my face at a distance. "Wait, who did you think I was?" I asked her playfully. Immediately, being faced with another human, a human who was regarding me with warmth, I'd started to feel a bit silly for panicking. Fingerprints on the window? What fucking nonsense. Something hit it, that's all. I couldn't be sure because it was so dark, but I think Annalise blushed a little. The guy who's been giving us grief," she admitted. "The one I wanted the Xanax for. I joked with Kelly that we should slip some into his port. I just had a brain fart, I guess." I laughed at the quaint expression. I'd never heard it before. "Well, thanks for mixing me up with a 300-pound 70-year-old, I guess," I quipped. Annalise laughed, but then her face turned stony again. "What was wrong?" she asked. "Why aren't you asleep?" I was somewhat taken aback. I wasn't aware I had to be?" Annalise shook her head, her smile returning. No, of course not. Sorry. Used to dealing with kids. Sorry. So what's up?" "Okay, so, I was hoping you had some aspirin. I've got a headache," I said. And, I trailed off. Annalise looked at me in the half-light, waiting. "I thought there was someone outside my window," I admitted quietly. Annalise let out a laugh that sounded shrill to my aching head. I glanced around, worried she'd wake a passenger, or worse, the baby. She clapped a hand over her mouth, then laughed again. "Sorry, it's just. This is a first," she said. "And I've had all sorts of weird passenger complaints. You probably had a nightmare. I'll fetch you some aspirin, then maybe you can go back to sleep." Back in my seat, I downed the 2 little blue pills Annalise had given me. They had a strange taste, lavender-like almost, like those candies I'd tried in the UK that time. I took a sip of the water she'd provided me to wash the taste away. After bringing my pills, Annalise had vanished off back into the staff quarters. I figured I'd blown any chance with her, and didn't really mind. I was thinking about Nicole, anyway. How she'd never flown outside the US, and how envious she'd been of the night flight I was taking, how she longed to see Greenland from the sky, in the dark. I should get a photo, I realized. I turned to look out the window and saw the shutter I'd pulled down earlier. Memories of the fingerprint came back, that dark, dirty mark on the glass. I shuddered, then laughed at myself. Fucking idiot. Screw that. Nicole would reward me if I got a few nice snaps out the window. Maybe even a bit of video footage. Yeah, she'd like that. I pulled up the shutter. A silent scream caught in my throat. Outside the window was utter, pitch darkness, the blackest night. But that didn't stop me from seeing what was there on the glass. Where before had been a fingerprint, there was now an entire handprint smeared on the outside of the plane's window. It was the same muddy red as the fingerprint. The handprint was lower down, and as I'd imagined from the initial mark, the hand that made it must have belonged to a very large man. I could see the lifeline, the fate line, the headline and more, gouges out of the filth that had been pressed against the glass. Whirls and swirls and spirals on the tips of its fingers. My head spun, I felt dizzy, cold. My limbs were heavy with terror, and a pulsing pain gripped the nape of my neck and wouldn't let go. I stared at the handprint, framed perfectly on the glass, silhouetted by the pitch-black impenetrable night beyond it. Red on black, impossibly present, a warning sign of a danger which I could not possibly comprehend or fathom. I tried to rise out of my seat, to stand. My head slumped forward, unmoving, my gaze drawn away from the horrible handprint and towards my own reflection in the dead monitor ahead. My legs felt like lead. I couldn't move. I felt like I'd run a marathon and my body had given up out of exhaustion. Even my head felt heavy. The taste of the 2 blue pills still lingered on my tongue. Were aspirin even blue? My head swam. Had I been drugged? I was drifting off, drifting away. I was falling asleep. But even as my eyes started to close and my brain drifted into the abyss, a cold jolt of terror woke me momentarily from the descent. The handprint swam into my mind, blurry and impossible to focus my thoughts on. But one thing was clear, one thing I hadn't thought about at the time. It had been pitch black outside. Total, utter, impenetrable darkness. But, from my window, I could previously see the plane's wing. I could see the light blinking on it. Before the handprint, when I'd looked, even in the darkness, I could see beyond the window. With all the energy I had left, I rolled my head to the left and stared at the handprint again. Sure enough, there it was. And there beyond it was the wing of the plane, the green light blinking. And there were the stars, pinpricks of light in the clear night sky. The handprint itself was faded now too, less vibrant, less clear. I could no longer make out the individual markings of the print, could no longer see the swirls of the fingerprints, or the clear definitions of the palm lines. As sleep took me, my final thoughts screamed one thing over and over in my head. It wasn't just the handprint I'd seen. I'd seen the hand, too. When I first looked, something had been blocking the window. I awoke to the sound of the pilot's voice. We were coming into Munich. The sun would be rising soon. For a blissful, peaceful moment, I forgot about everything that had happened. Then I remembered, and knew it must have been a dream. A chilling, upsetting dream. All around me, the other passengers were just now waking also. Voices began to fill the silence. People were looking around, bleary-eyed, confused. Annalise and Kelly were striding up and down the aisle, their outfits meticulous, their hair perfectly in place, their eyes bright and awake. I noticed that the shutter was down over my window. This settled it. I'd fallen asleep before the handprint ordeal, never opened the shutter, and that was that. I reached out to lift it, to put my mind at ease. "Sir." Annalise's voice startled me, my hand freezing on the handle of the shutter. "Sir." I dropped my hand and looked over at her, standing beside me. She slid into the empty seat and rested her hand on my forearm. "Did you have a good flight?" she asked. I nodded hesitantly. Her blouse seemed to be unbuttoned a little more than it had been. Her cheeks seemed flushed. She seemed excited. Her perfume smelled wonderful. "I just wondered if you have any spare time when we land, I've got a couple days leave, She ended her sentence with a quick flick of the tongue. No ambiguity there. Now, you've probably realized this by now, but I have a weakness for attractive people. I'm a flirt. I love to have my ego stroked, and other things if I'm being honest. So when I tell you that the idea of openly defying a woman who was straight up suggesting we fuck did not come naturally to me. I'm also not a suspicious person by nature, nor am I the kind to believe in conspiracies or the supernatural. So I can't begin to explain why I ignored Annalise, turned away from her, and reached out for the shutter. But I knew I'd made the right decision when I felt her grip my wrist, felt her tugging my hand towards her, as if trying to distract me further. I pulled my hand away from her thighs, confused and scared. With the other hand, I raised the shutter. There it was. The handprint. Dark red, rusty and dry. But it had been smeared, as if in the time I slept, something else had been pressed against the glass. Something even worse, something even more horrifying. The handprint had been smudged and wiped away in places, and from those places, it was easy to see. A face had been pressed against the glass. Anneli stood and left without a word. When we landed in Munich, I didn't even see her leave. But I did see someone else from the plane. 3 other people, in fact. A tanned white couple and their bald, suited bodyguard. They were leaving the airport as I skulked out, trying to avoid anyone and everyone. I needed some time to think, some time to process, and I almost missed them. But there they were. A couple, standing there with their luggage, their bodyguard with his arms folded. Their faces were steely, cold, blank. Something about them caught my attention, and for a moment, I couldn't work out what. Then, when I did, the terror that had been gripping me all night came flooding back in full force. My heart pounded in my chest and I tried to scurry out the airport doors, away into the Munich morning, away from this nightmare. Stupidly, I glanced back over my shoulder. The couple were looking right at me, their cold gazes piercing mine. They gave me a look, and I could tell in that moment that they were aware I knew. They saw me, and they knew. And I ran. Because this was the couple with the baby. The crying, screaming baby. The baby who'd made the first hours of the flight a nightmare for me and everyone else in that hideous steel sepulchre. Because then, as they were leaving the airport, luggage and bodyguard in tow, they sure as shit didn't have a baby with them anymore. I'm still in Germany. I was supposed to leave a few days after I arrived. But I'm still here. I want to leave. I really do. I even went to the airport one time, but a group of security agents were lurking near the boarding gate, and when they saw me, one of them started talking into their radio. I ran, and never went back. I don't know what I saw. I don't know what happened out there in the sky. I don't know what took the baby, or when it took it. I've been hiding, covering my tracks. I don't use my credit cards, or my cell phone. I've been using the internet on a motel connection from my laptop, browsing with Tor, incognito or deep web only. I don't have any answers. But I've done some research into the flight path, and an alarming amount of people talk about how they slept like babies on that particular flight, on that one Great Circle route. They talk about how it was the best night's sleep they've ever had. They praise the airline, of course. They talk about the thoughtful pilot who even played a lullaby for the babies on board. 1 or 2 of them complained that the plane had a strange, sweet smell about it. But they all, without exception, slept for the duration of the journey. Someone's in Munich looking for me. The guy in the motel, I've made friends with him, he keeps an eye out for me. A big, tall man was asking around about me. I don't want to know. I don't want to see him. But now, I don't know what to do. Someone else is asking after me now. Someone whose description fits Nicole. I don't know if it's her, or if they got to her or if it isn't her. I don't know who they are. I don't know what's out there in the skies. I'm no threat to anybody. I don't know anything. They might trace me from posting this. Fuck it, I don't know. But like I said, I try to be a good person. I know I've been an asshole in the past, but I've always tried to better myself. I've always tried to be a humanitarian. And so this is all I can do. All I can do is throw my warning out there, and hope that nobody else ends up in the same position I'm in. I doubt I'm the first. I'm sharing all I do know here in case something happens to me, and because I want you all to put my warning out into the world. Please, please listen to me. If you take a night flight, if you take this polar route with this particular airline, if something in the skies doesn't feel right, whatever you do, for the love of God, for your own safety, make sure you fall asleep. Update. Hello, it is Nicole Dyatlova. I am Jason's fiancée. Please be aware that English is not my first language. I am posting this on behalf of Jason's family and friends. Firstly, I am not in Germany and I have not been in Germany. I received an email from my fiancé Jason asking me if I was in Germany. Jason had been missing for around 2 months. No contact. Nothing. He is a player, so at first I believed he had run off. We have not been getting on and I intended to end our engagement, so I perhaps should have worried sooner than I did. That is on me. I have to live with this. Some days ago, I received an email from Jason. He seemed to be in a very bad state, panicked and paranoid. This was not the arrogant, confident Jason I knew, who says he is a man's man. He was ranting and rambling about a conspiracy with his flight 451 on Halley Airline. He believed that airspace over Greenland was home to some form of man or creature who had entered the plane and taken a baby. He believed the passengers had been put to sleep and linked me to many internet sites that talked about conspiracies on the Halley Airline. They talk about blood price and human cargo delivery. It is nonsense. Jason must be suffering from a breakdown and these internet websites have harmed him, and his parents agreed. We want to find Jason, but there is no trace of him now. The telephone number he gave me to call is dead and the motel he was staying at have no record of Jason Mansfield. We are very concerned about Jason's safety. I am horrified and upset at the comments here. I am worried that they have pushed Jason, a sick man, into something extreme. Now, it is your job to help us find Jason. He is not always perfect man, but he tries. I log in here because he used the same password everywhere. I have insomnia every night worrying since Jason emailed me. I have not slept. I am angry and upset. I want Jason to be at home and safe with his mother and his father. I offer to go to Germany, and so that is what I do today. I am sitting in the airport departure room as I write this, waiting to board the aeroplane to go and look for Jason. There are many people waiting for the flight. Men, women, all kinds of people. A baby is crying and it reminded me of Jason and his silly story. I am sad for him. I hope to find him in Germany and hope to receive help from any of these internet forum people. Update. I continue to read the crazy websites Jason has sent me in his last email he ever sent to me. There is a post here much like Jason's, but it is dated from December 2011, so it cannot be Jason. And yet the facts are much the same. There is also this comment. Interesting story, man. I was on a flight with Halley. We went over Greenland, going to France. I'd totally forgotten all about it until I read your post, but ISTG, there was a fucking baby crying the whole way for the first few hours, then I fell asleep and I didn't see that goddamn baby again. When we got off the plane I remember thinking, I wonder who the couple left it with. They had a bodyguard too. Just like in your story, Boyd. Tough bald guy in a suit. I am here in the departure lounge still and the baby is crying. A chill is in my tummy and I am scared. There is a big man in a suit with the couple here too. It cannot mean anything. It cannot. Jason is sick and lost in Germany, and that is why I must go to him. Update. The shepherd will secure lambs. The piper will lead the dance. The wolf will devour its prey. Then the lost will return. And when they do, none shall sleep,